Ukrainian authorities have now begun to block the transit of Russian oil into Hungary and into Slovakia.
Before we continue, we invite you to follow our channel, the only American show reporting live from Ukraine every day.
Yesterday, Ukraine and Russia exchanged 95 prisoners of war. That's 3 weeks after their last swap. There have been these occasional agreements to send captured troops home. Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. And Joe, when I see these reports of the prisoners of war being exchanged between Russia and Ukraine, it makes me think, well, maybe there is an opening for some peace talks here, but I guess not, huh?
Hey, Bob, good afternoon from Kyiv. And yeah, I don't think so. I think that, we've seen these throughout, these past 2.5 years. And so I don't think it's anything particularly new. In fact, we do have something of a new nature in the past 24 hours. The Ukrainian authorities, I think pretty surprisingly, have now begun to block the transit of Russian oil into Hungary and into Slovakia. It's pretty amazing. I think I've reported to you before from the Carpathian Mountains when I was standing right next to that pipeline. It was a very chilling thing to be there hiking in the forest in the mountains and to see this pipeline that was carrying oil from Russia. And Ukraine, that has been running this entire time. We've talked before about how, the White House gives sanctions waivers to Russian banks if they do business in oil. In many ways, the elite politicians and business leaders of the world, whatever happens here, they don't want that touched. And so it's interesting that Ukraine would block the transit of oil to Hungary in particular, and Slovakia. When we have in Hungary, the prime minister of Hungary is an ally of Russia. He was visiting Moscow, just a couple weeks ago, right when the Russians were attacking the children's hospital here. And so I'd say this is a pretty extraordinary move, and it kind of echoes what Ukrainians have been doing these past months when, using drones to hit Russian oil refineries, often over the objections of Washington. But I think this is because, they have to be strategic and careful. Ukrainians can't annoy their European and Western partners, but things are pretty serious and dire. And so they got to make some moves to send some signals that if they're not given the right weapons and permission to hit the Russians in a more conventional way, they might have to touch the oil supply. And today it's a little bit cooler today. It's like 85, a bit of relief. And I had some meetings in the heart of Kyiv, near the Maidan square where the Ukrainians always have their revolutions. And right on the edge of the square, there's a forest and a sea of flags from Ukraine and from many other nations. And each one signifies a fallen warrior. And it's a powerful and difficult thing to walk through. You see tens of thousands of Ukrainian flags. And then as you walk through, it was a bit breezy, and so you can hear the rustle of the flags in the wind. There's lots of candles, prayer cards, photographs. And then very often you'll see a little cluster within the Ukrainian flags of American flags, usually all in a cluster together. And you see the names, including some guys that I knew. You see the names of Americans who've come here. And you see the Old Glory flying, hanging from a few trees, with flags from the UK and Georgia and Sweden. And it really is a powerful thing. And you see these people who are not household names, beyond their town maybe, who traveled here, not being forced to, not conscripted, not like it was in World War II, but choosing to come here to stand for freedom. And it's a really powerful thing. And people are walking through this of all different ages in silence. I saw a few girls approaching to put flowers before different flags. And you see the loss of lives of Ukrainians, but then also of the foreigners here. And that's just steps away from that main square, the Maidan, where, in 2014, people said, we are going to be free. We're not going to be under the yoke of any tyrant, Russia or anyone else. And this is the continuation of that. And this is the continued price the Ukrainians have to pay for that desire to be free.
Because of the assassination attempt on Saturday, the Republican convention, and then all the talk about politics and what the fate of Joe Biden might be, there's been very little news reporting here lately about Ukraine and also about what's going on in Israel. You must be aware of that, Joe, and I'm sure that's frustrating for you when the war effort goes to the back page.
It is. I mean, and even I have a vague awareness of what's happened in Israel. I'm also trying to pay attention to what's happening in Taiwan, and it hit me today. Taiwan. I saw there were comments made by former President Trump about Taiwan. They might have to protect themselves or pay the United States for protection, and talking about how far away it is. And I understand. Here I am in Ukraine, so I see it and feel it intensely. But when things are far away, it's hard to. It is hard to appreciate it when you have so many other things to care about. And I was talking with one of Ukraine's top philosophers today, who's also in the military, a priest in the military, and we're talking about what is this about? What are Ukrainians fighting for? And he said, are they fighting for the borders of 1991? And as I looked at those flags, that can't be the answer. You're not going to give your life, whether you're Ukrainian or some foreigner, or you're not going to be an American who's going to support this country for some borders of 1991. It has to be about something deeper. And the philosopher, soldier, priest was describing this idea that, every society has to construct a narrative, a meaning that gives our nation purpose. And for Russians, it's always been authority. That's how they've survived, with top-down authority. But for Ukrainians, it's been this idea of freedom. And, that's part of the reason why Ukrainian institutions are so weak. That's part of the reason why there's, there can be a bit of chaos, why the nation was kind of easy to invade initially, because they don't have strong institutions. Because for Ukrainians, it's about the freedom of the human person. And the philosopher said to me, in Russian culture, there's not really an idea of personhood. It's a state, and you just follow the rules of the state. And he said this explains why Russians are able to, they might care for their families, but then they punch the clock and they work as a soldier, and they can go kill kids in a hospital in Ukraine because they don't even question it. But for Ukrainians, in their folklore and in their songs, they grew up with this idea of freedom, of a human being as a vessel of dignity. And so anytime someone tells them to do something, they're going to question it and say, is this in accord with who I want to be? Mm-hmm. And so we are facing these two ideas. And I think for Americans, as we talk about freedom, but we need to know, what is our vision for freedom? What do we look to? And an American veteran told me yesterday, he was saying, when we had the greatest generation still among us, we had a vision of freedom because these people were willing to die for it. But now we talk about it, but what is it? And maybe Ukraine, where people are dying for it, not just Ukrainians, but Americans too. Maybe this is the place where we can see what freedom is. And the last thing from this, the philosopher, priest, soldier said, in order to have freedom, you have to have a sense of wonder. Without wonder, you can't have freedom because you close yourself off to possibility. And so the first step to being free is to have this sense of wonder and this sense of there can be potential, that nothing holds you back. And that's so much in accord with what we always knew about the American dream. And so I'm seeing here, in these dark, heavy days, as we talk about freedom and people are analyzing, why is this worth it, no matter how difficult it gets? And it is for this deep idea of personhood and dignity and the wonder, the sense of wonder that we get from the idea of freedom.
Those are great thoughts we could apply to a lot of situations. I like that sense of wonder. Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine, thank you. We'll talk tomorrow.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?